What's up, everybody, and welcome in to another edition of the Sit Down. As always, if you enjoy this video, please make sure you hit that like button. Let me know what you think of today's discussion in the comment section below. If you're new around here, you just haven't done it yet. We're living on a rock and seeing this video for the first time. I don't know what you're waiting for. Hit that subscribe button below now so you never miss another sit down video. Today's video is powered, as always, by Profit X. I know a lot of you out there watching or listening enjoy wagering on sports. There's no better place right now than to go test out the app at Profit X. You're going to get some of the best odds in the business, whether it's playoff baseball, the NFL, college football. You got NBA starting up soon, the NHL. It really doesn't matter. Profit X has you covered. Download the app, click the link in the pinned comment of this video. Get yourself an account. You can also use my promo code Jeff Nadu. You're going to get some profit cash and some other bonus perks. And remember, if you live in states like California or Texas, maybe Alabama, you can use Profit X right now. It is a betting exchange, and it's going to deliver you the best odds in the business. Click the link now in the pinned comment or use my promo code Jeff Nadu at profitx.co. Today, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to get into another very interesting organized crime topic. And we continue to hear about things like the mafia is no longer being looked at by the FBI. We've heard recent rumors that the Federal Bureau of Investigation no longer considers the mafia a nationwide problem, and they're not really looking much into them. That said, there are still families out there doing things. And one thing that I'm finding by recent videos I'm doing is that the Gambino crime family is still alive and well in America in 2025. Today, we're going to talk about that and more next on the sit down. And I do first want to discuss some of the recent news about the shakeup involving the mafia and the FBI. For years, the FBI, its partners, the DAs in some of these districts, the supervisory agents, all these different people have dead set out to stop and take away the mob in this country. And we've seen them do a pretty good job of it. It's recently been reported that the FBI is down to one squad that will investigate the mob today. For years, there were 5 squads that looked into the Bonanno, Colombo, Gambino, Genovese, and Lucchese crime families. Today, there was just one, and it is called C5. That is the only group currently that's looking at the mob and has them as some sort of priority. So all the investigations that led to people like this presenting crimes, presenting different sorts of indictments, you're going to see them be far and fewer between. And what we're seeing is states are taking more of a role in that. We're seeing the New York state government, the New Jersey state government, the Pennsylvania state government, they're starting to put out racketeering indictments, and in turn, picking up the slack for some of the things that the FBI no longer is considering a priority. It must be made clear, though, the FBI is still watching the mob. There are still active agents out there taking photos. There are still surveillance things going on. If you think that the FBI has just completely stopped looking at the mob, you're wrong. Now, what this will lead to, though, is more pervasiveness with the mob. They may look to do a little bit more, maybe that they weren't doing 10 years ago. The mafia is no longer the behemoth it once was in terms of organized crime or transnational crime or some sort of, I'm not trying to lend to you that the mafia is on the criminal totem pole very high in America. That said, the semblance of the mob is still around, as we know, and the gold standard right now in the mob is the Gambino crime family. And over the next 20 or so minutes, I really want to outline why I think that. I think there's a multiple prong reason as to why I think the Gambino family is still alive and well, why they're still able to make changes, why they still have a governing body and a powerful group at that, why they're still making new members. And we also are seeing abundance of facts that they are still using tactics that they were using in the 70s and 80s to take what they want by force. The big question is, and I'm going to address this as well, who's running this group? My thought is, and I've said this for a while, I do believe there is one insular individual running this group, and there's a triumvirate around him. Let's first begin, though, was something that the Gambinos have that a lot of these other families do not. They have two distinct group of leaders, whether it be the Sicilian faction that for years has been allegedly run by a person called Domenico Cefalù, as well as a person called Lorenzo Menino. We have seen through various indictments, including the one I did last week, there is still a large Sicilian influence in this family. And I've related the Sicilians in this family to something that the Gambinos have had for years. That wing of people that are able to essentially do what they want to do, and they're a sort of faction, if you will. Remember, this group was led for years by John Gambino, who in turn was related to the Cherry Hill Gambinos, a group of people that operated essentially on their own in South Jersey under the auspice of both Philadelphia as well as the Gambino crime family. John Gambino then takes over. We saw people like John D'Amico have involvement with this crew, Frank Cali, the late Frank Cali, and we see some of his connections through people like Tall Pete Inzerillo, who is said to still be around. There's a large Sicilian confluence in this family, and that's something that not a lot of the other families can say. And we saw in the Lanny indictment, there were multiple Sicilian mobsters that were associates to this family in New York, liaisons, if you will. We've seen over the years a person called Ernie Grillo, a made member in this family. We've heard that he's a possible liaison for this group in Sicily. So there's a large involvement and influence of Sicilians, which a lot of families can't say. We also look at the other strong faction of this group, and it's your older, dead in the wool gangsters, your Gene Gottis, your Nicky Carrazzos, your Lenny Di Maria, your Michael Paradiso, your Tommy Sneakers, your John Carniglias. All of these people have been gangsters for decades. And as I've talked about, these people don't retire. They don't go become greeters at Walmart. They don't become, dentists or mechanics. They go back to the streets. We know time and time again, these people, they are who they are. And as I've talked about, Gene Gotti, we look at someone like him. We look at the influence that the Gotti name has had for decades in this family. We've also seen various reasons to believe not only is Gene Gotti active still in the life, but he is still very respected and very much has a group around him. I talked about the fact that I know some of you poo-pooed the fact that he just went to a funeral for a friend. Do you know who we're talking about here? We're talking about Gene Gotti. And we see people acting subservient to Gene Gotti. It's pretty easy to understand. Throw in the fact we know that his rackets are still very much there, whether it be his involvement with having his hands in catering halls or restaurants or whatever. So again, we have two distinct factions in this family. We also look at the group and the control that they have, which is through the captains in this family. You look at some of the people that are involved as captains, whether it be Tommy Sneakers, Andrew Campos, Frank Camuso, Bo Filippelli, Joe Giuliano, who is pretty old, but Joe Giuliano is a prime example. Joe Giuliano has made tens of millions of dollars as a bookmaker over the years in the Gambino family. He has made tons of money for this group. We also look at first legit rackets and how this family is still very involved with them. Take the case of a person called Robert Basilich, a Gambino crime family associate. He is in the crew, allegedly, of Captain Frankie Calypso Camuso. When we look at this indictment, we're talking about very large scale construction projects that are being involved with the mob. You look at this kickback scam through Basilich. Basilich at one point was the vice president of a company called the Rinaldi Group. It's alleged that he stole approximately $5 million from several developers in a kickback scheme that started and spanned nearly a decade. Now, Basilich, who was the vice president at the time, was recently, over the last several years, indicted on bribery and other charges stemming from the fact that he allegedly steered more than $100 million in contracts to subcontractors. In exchange, Basilich and his associates, including Camuso and Louis Astuto, received more than $7 million in bribes. Now, that's just one person and one guy connected to one captain in this family. And we've seen various high level media companies discuss that the mob's involvement is still very much making a comeback in New York City construction. We also know, and I've talked about this on a pretty consistent basis. We look at someone like Andrew Campos, who for years has been a huge earner in this family. We know about his connections that I've talked about in other videos to people like James Cahill, who was one of the biggest union people in the New York City area. We know that Campos has become a very rich man, not only through scams years ago, but scams in the construction business. And we've talked about that in videos about Andrew Campos, which can be found on this channel. These are very big earners. These are people that are kicking up and keeping the flow of money moving in this family. There is no other group in New York City, as far as mob family, that has some of the earning captains that this group has. These are very powerful people. And for the most part, these are all pretty young in the grand scheme of things. They have a good mix in this family of old, trusted, old school guys, middle aged, who are still young enough to take over the mantle once those people get out of the way. And we also will see, which I'll talk about, the involvement of the youth movement in this family, which that might be new to some of you. But when I say young, I'm talking about 40 and under. This group is still making new members and they're getting younger and younger. That said, we look at a particular indictment dropped by the state of New York within the last month. Get a load of this, involving a mob associate by the name of Benedetto Cupo. Now, Cupo is the owner of a concrete construction firm, most notably Eastland Associate Corporation, Eastland Services, and IMN Group. Now, he was arrested recently for alleged frauds, including the theft of more than 1.6 million in COVID-related loans, 3 million in wage theft from his employees, defrauding the New York State Insurance Fund of more than $1.1 million, and expansive criminal tax fraud. Now, in a 30-count indictment involving the Manhattan DA's racket bureau, Benedetto Cupo orchestrated numerous frauds over the course of years, stealing millions from hardworking New Yorkers' wages and public funds they rely on when hurt on the job. Now, recently, Benedetto Cupo was involved in this skyscraper in New York City on 7 Platt Street in New York City. Now, I bring up Cupo in this video due to the fact that not only was he arrested in 1993 for his familial ties to both the Lucchese and Genovese crime family, but it has been said that he has maintained some sort of contact with Gambino Crime Family alleged member Daniel Fama. Now, when we look at Cupo, get a load of this conversation between Fama and Cupo in 2023. Now, this comes directly from the indictment. In September of 2023, after Danny Fama texted Cupo about a phone call he had received regarding an on-the-job injury by one of the defendant's workers, Cupo replied, quote, "That's okay. These monkeys are always making claims. It's sickening." Now, between August of 21 and August of 23, Alvin Bragg, the DA, also stated, quote, "There were more than 20 claims by Cupo employees of, quote, workplace injuries that occurred on New York County job sites." Now, Cupo told New York State trade companies that he had less than 10 employees when his company employed more than 100 laborers, carpenters, and rebar workers. He also stole more than $3 million from his employees between 2019 and 2023 by withholding these wages to purportedly cover tax obligations of his workers simply by keeping the funds and using them as he saw fit. So again, Mr. Cupo, is he a mob soldier? No. Is he a made man? No. But he has various ties, most recently to alleged members of the Gambino family. So again, all you got to do is look into some of these indictments. None of this is speculative. This is all fact. All of these people have connections to this family. Now, I also want to bring up, I want to go back to Mr. Camuso, who is probably one of the stronger captains in this family right now in terms of money making. We talked about the big amounts of money coming in allegedly through one of his people, person, Robert Basilich. We would also learn in a recent indictment involving Basilich that both he and Louis Astuto, two associates and or members of the family, are very highly connected to Mr. Camuso. We also know that this individual, a person called Anthony Cinque, who is one of the youngest alleged members of this family today, is a very big earner. We would also find out that in an indictment involving him recently, not only was he, but another person called John J. Lafort were overseeing a person called Edward A. Lafort. We know that Edward A. Lafort and a man called Frederick Falcone were collecting usurious loan payments from loan sharking victims that both Lafort and Falcone provided them to, respectively and collectively. These proceeds were then delivered to Mr. Lafort and Mr. Cinque at Auto Lounge of Edison, I'll use car dealership, which is partially owned by, quote, Anthony J. Cinque, and Edward Lafort would then leave proceeds at a legitimate business called Frank and Danny's Pizzeria in Staten Island. Now, Mr. Cinque, very young, in his late 30s, early 40s, Mr. Cinque is a very rich man. Very rich man. Now, we can see that because all you got to do is look on the internet and you can find it pretty easily. The continued use of social media by not only these defendants, but these defendants' families are problematic. I mean, this is exactly how, and we see this through and through and through everywhere on the internet involving crime, whether it's black organized crime, whether it's the mob, whether it's anything. Social media is a very good roadmap, and really just using good old-fashioned surveillance, all of this stuff. And in the indictment surrounding Lafort and Cinque was seen on surveillance, meeting at a diner and outside of the home of multiple Gambino Crime Family captains, including Frankie Camuso. Now, I talked a little bit earlier about that youth movement, whether it be Cinque or other folks. We also know that the individual in the baseball cap, it is largely believed at this point, Tommy Cacciapoli Jr. has become a reputed member of this family. Now, that name might be familiar because it is. His father is Thomas Cacciapoli Sr., a.k.a. Tommy Sneakers, a long-standing captain in this family. Now, I've heard that the individual in the hat I just showed you is, from what I would be told by a source, as a, quote, big earner. And he has all sorts of money-making opportunities and ways around, most of them legit businesses. Now, it's not just legit business that these people are doing. Now, remember, these are people that are quite young. These are people in their 20s and 30s. We also see that in this photo, there are some familiar faces, particularly the one in the middle, an individual called John Gotti, the grandson of John Gotti Sr. We know that he was a mob associate for years. We know that he went to prison over it. We know that he was involved with people like Gene Borrello and Vincent Asaro. We know that the person to his immediate left, his brother, they were both recently arrested. We also know that the two on the far left and the one on the far right, I've heard some about them. I'm not going to put their names out there, but I have heard. All of these people hang with each other. Now, I'm not going to speculate on whether the young Gotti kid is made. I don't know if he is. There's rumors I've heard. I'm not going to put them out there because there's no real, I don't have any proof of that. So again, a youth movement has also been created with this family. New members are being made. And I mentioned last week in the video I did on the Lanny crew, they're readily making new members. We also know that it's not just legit business. The mob is still very involved with their bread and butter, things like illegal gambling, loan sharking. And we saw that again in the enterprise corruption case brought down by the New York state government against people like Cinque and Eddie Lafort. You look at this here, a loan book of approximately $500,000 in loans. Now, between a 6-month period, between September 2022 and March of 2023, this criminal enterprise accounted for over 70 bettors who placed approximately $23 million in illegal wagers in a 6-month period. That's a big bookmaking operation there. We also know that through a case called Par Funding involving the Lafort brothers, they were using mob tactics to get what they want. You look at what Par Funding is. Federal law enforcement agencies executed search warrants at the principal places of business in Philadelphia and at the home of Joseph Lafort. Par Funding was incorporated in Delaware, and their principal place of business was in Philadelphia. Par Funding held itself out to be a merchant cash advance company and lender. Now, multiple witnesses and interviews about documents have shown that Par Funding and its agents used fraudulent and extortionate means to collect payments from merchant debtors to whom Par Funding and its affiliates owned money. Now, what exactly is merchant lending? Well, it's a legalized loan opportunity where a company like Par Funding involving these people will go to you and say, hey, you need $20,000 for your business. We'll give it to you. But what we're going to do is we're going to hook into your business. We're going to hook into ways, and you're going to pay us back. And we're going to charge an extortionate amount to get that, a huge amount, a big interest rate. And if you don't pay us, we're going to use it the guise of it's legal. But what makes it not legal is these individuals sent collectors. They themselves assaulted people over this. That makes it illegal. We also saw in that indictment involving Lanny in the video last week that I did, we see that the mob still is very interested in doing things like using arson, attacking people with hammers, using their fists, bashing glasses over people's faces. These are old school tactics. Now we take it back full circle and we go back to what I said at the beginning. There is less and less oversight by the feds on this. And when the cats are away, the mouse will play. I'm not referring to these people as mouses, but again, the simple thought of some of these people are still very much involved in some of the same things we know that they've always been involved. So we kind of wrap this all up. So what have we seen beyond a reasonable doubt? Number one, there's a strong basis of a foundation of leaders, whether it's old school guys, Sicilians, high-end captains. We know that all of those people are making good money. There's a lot of soldiers that are making good money for this family. They have control in certain areas. They're using intimidation and old school tactics to get what they want, both legally and illegally. And there are points it's still where they are willing to use certain tactics to get what they want. And that could be by force. We also know there's a decent youth movement. There's a young group of people that are coming up, whether they're being in their 30s, 40s, even 50s. That's still fairly young in terms of the mob. Some of these families can't say that. Now, the major question as we end, who's running this family? Who's on the administration? Well, here's one thing I'll tell you. According to people that I know, sources that I have, it is abundantly clear at this point that Luis Valario is no longer the number 3. It had been reported that he was the consigliere. From what I understand, Luis Valario is quite sick at this point. He's in his 80s. So we could venture to believe that they have moved on from him as some sort of, even if he ever was on the administration. I've talked to various people, okay? And I know no one thinks I talk to anybody, but in the 4 years I've been here, I've gotten to know a lot of people. And I've heard from various people that say Gene Gotti is on the administration of this family. Is he the boss? I believe he is. Is there a triumvirate of people that are also very involved? Yes. And I think it consists of a grouping of Gene Gotti, Lenny DiMaria, Dom Cefalù, and I think Nicky Carrazzo's in and around there as well. These people are dead in the wool. They've been around many years. I've also heard from the same sourcing that Lorenzo Menino is just the captain. And I talked about that nearly a year ago. The family is still alive and well. And if there is a semblance of the mob in New York City, which we know there is, this is the gold standard, if you will. This is the strongest family, at least to me. Are they a high-end group on the criminal totem pole? No. They're not the Sinaloa cartel. They're not, anything like that. But they find ways to still make a lot of money. Look, is every person in this family rich? No, but there's still a good group and a good core of people that are making a good amount of money that are alleged members of the mob. So we'll see what's next. Will they become more prominent now that there's a little less scrutiny on them? I guess we'll have to wait and see. I hope you enjoyed this video. We'll see you next week here on the Sit Down.